Ouchie started receiving daily skin transplants using artificial skin, but they wouldn't stick. His muscles began falling off the bone. r/AskReddit by online comps. Serious, what are some of the creepiest declassified documents made available to the public? Jeffrey Dahmer's full confession, a couple of 100 pages of pure madness. Necrophilia, dismemberment, skinning, lobotomy, body part preservation, cannibalism. Dahmer became pretty close to his interrogating detectives, Dennis Murphy and Patrick Kennedy, and provided a lot of detail to them. A lot of it in a pretty candid, offhand manner. It's incredibly hard to find Dahmer's confession online without it being behind a paywall, but it is in the public domain. Never forget that the local PD returned to Dahmer a naked, beaten, crying, bleeding minor boy that had escaped Dahmer's grasp. Also, despite two women who found him protesting and pleading with the officers to save his life, the officers were reinstated too. Why wouldn't they do anything? Edit. Okay, I know why they didn't help him now. It's really fucked up. A combination of incredible incompetence and homophobia. The police failed to look up Dahmer's identity, where they realized that he was a registered sex offender who was currently on probation. The boy's name was Connor Axon Thassamphone. He was the brother of another boy who Dahmer had molested years earlier, also the reason he was on probation. The police officers also delivered the boy to Dahmer's apartment. If they had investigated the stench emanating from the place, they would have found numerous decomposing body parts from previous murders. Recordings were discovered of the officers making homophobic statements to their dispatcher and cracking jokes about reuniting the lovers. Operation Northwoods. Basically, the US government was going to carry out attacks its own people, as well as other military targets, and blame it on the Cuban government, so that the US would have a justified reason for going to war with Cuba. The plan involved blowing up US ships and even inciting acts of terrorism on the streets of America, killing civilians. It was backed by the Dudian Joint Chiefs of Staff. Thankfully, John Kennedy vetoed the idea. According to Adam Walensky, JFK's speechwriter and friend at the time, JFK left the meeting and said, "And we call ourselves the human race." After the Mile massacre, killing of around 400 to 500 innocent civilians in Vietnam after an army troop killed an entire village, the US government established a group to investigate other war crimes like this occurring in Vietnam, the Vietnam War Crimes Working Group. They found 28 massacres of equal or greater magnitude than Mile that the public was unaware of, so literally thousands of innocent people killed by U.S. soldiers. The information has since been reclassified, but there were several journal articles on it when it was first released. Not sure if it's creepy, but certainly disturbing. Not sure if it's declassified, but the case of Hisashi Ouchi. He was a Japanese nuclear plant worker who was exposed to a lot of radiation which left him looking like a fallout gal. They kept him alive for 3 months, even though he was in a lot of pain. His heart even stopped 3 times in an hour, but they kept on resuscitating him. I don't know much about it, but it is interesting to read about. Says when his heart failed the last time they didn't bring him back, because his family wanted him to have a peaceful death. There's nothing peaceful about the incredible amount of pain and suffering he was subjected to. After 1 week in the hospital, he began to show outward signs of radiation sickness. His skin began sloughing off. Because his cells couldn't regenerate, no new skin formed to replace it. He again began to have difficulty breathing. Ouchie said, "I can't take it anymore. I'm not a guinea pig." He was in extreme pain despite medication. At this time, he was put on a ventilator and kept in a medically induced coma. Ouchie's intestines started to melt. 3 weeks later, he started hemorrhaging. He began receiving blood transfusions, sometimes as many as 10 in 12 hours. He began losing a significant amount of fluids, 10 liters, or over 2.5 gallons, a day, through his skin, so they wrapped him completely in gauze. He was bleeding from his eyes. His wife said that it looked like he was crying blood. Ouchie started receiving daily skin transplants using artificial skin, but they wouldn't stick. His muscles began falling off the bone. They should have just let him pass. What a horrible way to go when your time comes. Methods of reported torture that author Douglas Valentine wrote were used at the interrogation centers included rape, Gang rape. Rape using eels, snakes. Military intelligence officer K. Barton Osborne reports that he witnessed the following use of torture. The use of the insertion of the 6-inch dowel into the canal of one of my detainees' ears. And the tapping through the brain until dead. Operation Sea Spray. The military sprayed supposedly harmless bacteria over San Francisco to study the spread of biological weapon attacks. It was revealed that this happened over 200 times all across the US. You have to be ducking kidding me. In 1981, Nevin's surviving family members filed suit against the federal government, alleging negligence. My grandfather wouldn't have died except for that, and it left my grandmother to go broke trying to pay his medical bills. Says Mr. Nevin's grandson, Edward J. Nevin III, a San Francisco attorney who filed the case in US District Court. The lower court ruled that the government was immune from lawsuits. The Nevin family appealed the suit all the way to the US Supreme Court, which declined to overturn lower court judgments. Not so much creepy, but rather pretty freaking cool in a 50s sci-fi B-movie kind of way. Project 1794. Top secret program with the US Air Force working with a Canadian aeronautics company to build a supersonic flying saucer-like aircraft that would be able to simultaneously wage psychological war on our Cold War enemies as well as physical war. It was also designed to be a bomber. The project was scrapped when they figured out that not only would it be too expensive to build enormous flying discs, but also that crafts of that shape were near impossible to fly at supersonic speed. In 1984, a psychic remote viewed the planet Mars for the CIA. In his remote view, he's asked to travel backwards to several points in time in Mars history and several points of interest using coordinates. The psychic ends up describing things like some sort of planetary catastrophe, strange structures, including pyramids, and the strange inhabitants on the red planet. Whether you believe in aliens and conspiracy theories or not, it's definitely weird that an official branch of the government has run experiments like these. It was fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage? With the sanction and bidding of the all-highest? George Hunter White, who oversaw drug experiments for the CIA as part of Operation Midnight Climax. One of the children was filmed numerous times performing sexual acts with high-ranking federal government officials in a scheme set up by Cameron and other cultural researchers to blackmail the officials to ensure further funding for the experiments. The CIA was working on a heart attack gun back in the 1960s-70s. It started off as a conspiracy theory, but gained enough momentum nationwide that it forced the US government's hand and they finally admitted the theory was mostly accurate. Short version, they never had a fully functional heart attack gun, but they did have a nearly working prototype. The idea was that it would have a very small projectile that would be laced with a chemical that would induce a heart attack and leave a hole smaller than one left behind by a syringe. While they never had a fully working version, they did have a prototype, but abandoned the project once they more or less had to admit the conspiracy was mostly true. I find this to be among the creepiest/scariest things declassified by the government simply because of the consequences of them admitting to having been working on such a weapon. For one, it shows that the US government was very serious, at least at one point in time, about being able to take someone out with it being easily traced back to them. Whether they would have used this on private US citizens or on foreign agents is debatable, but they easily could have used it to silence people who were pushing to further advance civil rights or people who generally spoke out against the government in general. It's also scary because it makes you stop and think how many conspiracy theories are correct or at least scarily close to being correct. In the 1940s, a Swedish group of scientists gave mentally ill patients candy to see the effects it would have on their teeth. What makes it especially bad is that these experiments were performed on people who were unreducible, who had no say in what went on, and needless to say their teeth were beyond repair. Once again in the 1940s, the US government, in an attempt to study the effects radiation had on newborns and pregnant women, gave doses of radiation to newborns and pregnant children women. In one study, researchers gave pregnant women doses of iodine 131. When they inevitably miscarried, they studied the women's aborted embryos in an attempt to discover at what stage And to what extent radioactive iodine crosses the placental barrier. Not really classified, but very creepy. The business plot of 1933, the wealthiest businessmen of America, like the names you see on banks and buildings in America today, allegedly formed a plot to overthrow President FDR and install a military leader in his place. Their choice was a US Marine general named Smedley Butler, as he was a decorated leader of the highest rank. Butler, a loyal patriot, played along until they were seriously about to attempt to collapse the US economy by holding the financial stability of the country hostage. He rolled on them and testified to Congress about the planned coup. No one was prosecuted. General Smedley Butler may be the reason the world does not, officially, have a society like the United Corporations of Rockefeller, Morgan and Chase. Unit 731 is completely ducked. Jesus Christ, they removed their stomachs and attached the esophagus to the intestines. Amputated arms and reattached them. Froze people's limbs then thawed them out. Just some crash man. Well, ain't this some Instead of being tried for war crimes after the war, the researchers involved in Unit 731 were secretly given immunity by the US in exchange for the data they gathered through human experimentation. The Americans did not try the researchers, so that the information and experience gained in bioweapons could be co-opted into the US biological warfare program, as had happened with Nazi researchers in Operation Paperclip. Toy box killer transcript. Dude and his wife kidnapped young girls for his sex dungeon and played this tape for them when they woke up, detailing what he was going to do to them, including torture, raped by his dog, and how he doesn't get caught by brainwashing them to forget. Edit. Warning. Once you read, you can never go back. Be prepared to have your soul shaken. Please let this poor cat get his subscribe, comment, and like. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon for future videos. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to drink water.